There's plenty of information out there on why you should float and why people say you should float. That includes people who enjoy it, that includes float center owners especially. And although I think when we first even looked at the question of like, why shouldn't some people float or why shouldn't I float, kind of seems counterproductive, but there is actually two categories, maybe three depending how you look at it, of that vary from serious to not as serious and more of just fun discussion of why you shouldn't float, which we will cover right now. Some of these we can't tell you the answer, and there's situations that might be where you personally and subjectively may want to float or not, and there's other reasons just medically that you probably shouldn't or you need to consult with your doctor. So a couple of those main ones would be like if you have a huge cut or scrape or something that's going to be irritated in salt water. Floating in salt water or even in a pool, but specifically salt water with an open wound is like not recommended and does not feel good and is just not a great idea. Another one would be, which falls in the same category, which is recent tattoos. Even small line art, it's a good idea and highly suggested to wait till it heals. And especially when you have bigger body pieces that are done, and especially when they're like full solid colors, you definitely need to give yourself some time to recover from that. We usually say like 4 to 6 weeks. I'd more just consult with the person doing your tattoos, because very similar to why you wouldn't want to go swimming with a fresh tattoo is similar when it comes to floating, except floating is way more aggressive on an unhealed or unfinished tattoo. Also, I'm not sure if we covered hair dye yet. That's probably just gonna be a whole separate video. First off, the reason you don't want to do it is like it can have the potential to dye tank water, but more of the huge pain in the ass for us is that it can dye the shower area, the fiberglass in the tank, and it just is like an incredible amount of work to clean and restore. It's not really worth it because it ends up costing us time and money, and also you time and money, because if you're going and getting your hair dyed and then it all leaches out or wears out prematurely, it kind of sucks.
It's a lose-lose for everybody.
It's a lose-lose for everybody. On to more of a serious note though. There's fortunately not a lot of things that are stopping you to float, but the things that do are quite more serious, are just very serious. So one of them is uncontrolled epilepsy. I am going to assume that a lot of people who are curious if they have epilepsy, they probably already know, and they probably already know from their doctor whether it's something that's controlled or not, or monitored or not. And so within that, we've never had any issues. We haven't heard of any issues in other float centers. It's just one of those things that you do want to be careful of, because when you're actually floating, especially in the dark, and you start to go into like heavy relaxation mode, sometimes when we're absent of so much stimuli, that our brain will actually start to pick out colors and shapes and sparkles and stars, all in our own beautiful imaginary nation.
Imaginary nation.
Yeah. Your brain does all kinds of cool stuff when you float, but when you're laying back there and you have your eyes closed and suddenly you have all these crazy colors and shapes and stuff like that. But that's definitely something that even on your first float can happen. And when you have something like epilepsy and that's not under control, that could be an issue, which is why it's one of the biggest contraindications. The second one, which is super serious, and it's especially serious with everything going on right now with quarantining, with COVID that's currently happening. Everything from mental health and depression is a huge issue. And although floating can be phenomenal for general anxiety, general depression, and the like, it's one of those things that comes to a point. It's something, if you plan to come in and float for those reasons, whether it's helping with PTSD or an anxiety or depression, and floating is something you've thought about doing, definitely chat with your doctor or therapist to see if it's something that is actually going to be beneficial to you. And especially when it comes down to like isolating yourself and spending a lot of time with yourself in your own head, you really want to be careful with that. So definitely just chat with your therapist and your doctor before coming in to float. The reason you might not want to float is if you are sick or you just have a lot of congestion. Even if it was just seasonal allergies and your nose was stuffed up, it's just not fun to float when you have congestion. You're sitting there trying to float and relax and having to breathe through your mouth.
High humidity.
High humidity. It's just honestly not that fun. What else do we have here?
What do you got on your laptop there?
Well, one here is, if you're accustomed to strange experiences such as OBEs, lucid dreaming, and astral projections, which may affect you in a negative way, then you may want to hold off entering the float tank.
And this is an interesting one because it kind of dives out of the realm of the scientific and into the realm of like first-hand experience.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Totally.
based on our experience, we've definitely had people that have come in and had trippy experiences like that before. So for us professionally, in my opinion, I think that it's really important to talk about. Me and you have looked into this stuff when we were younger, in those mid-20s psychedelic days, let's just call them.
The mid-20s psychedelic imagination days.
Imagination days.
Just imagine like one of those incredibly crazy, borderline lucid dreams that you've had that like, it wasn't, I mean, it could be really, really like a good feeling, it could be a negative feeling, but the reality of it is like you woke up from a dream or you woke up from sleeping and you're like, that was some crazy shit. If somebody is wanting to come in and float and that's something that they've known to have challenges with in the past, and especially to do with sleep, then just, we want you to be aware of it.
You know, it's a thing, and it's not a common thing people tend to talk about. But when you own a float center, it's one of those things that you should really consider. And it's not like it's not a reality. The world's a weird place and weird stuff happens. So as long as we can accept that, then maybe we can start to have more of these conversations. You know, we're not scientists, we're doctors, and we haven't studied these things, but it's just like, just because, again, just like anything, just because, you know, it's not studied doesn't mean it doesn't exist or doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of us are very much into the idea of like facts, but then there's also a lot of just subjective realities and subjective experiences that you have that that feel very real and affect us in some way. I think the last part to wrap this all up though, you are terrified of spending time with yourself. We've all been scared of spending time with ourselves at some point or another, especially if we've been ignoring certain things in our life or going through some stuff that we maybe don't want to admit right away or have to deal with. It's just a lot to handle, and a lot of our stress can be kind of tracked down to there. But if we just don't do it, it's just, eventually you can only hide so much stuff under your rug before that rug is just like, I'm out of here, I'm getting out of here, this is too much. You might not want to float if you don't want to look at yourself a little bit deeper, but on that flip side is that's one of my favorite parts of a float. Many times it like unveils a lot of cool things that we can learn about ourselves, and that can be terrifying and really hard, but also one of the most freeing things you can possibly experience in this day and age when a lot of stuff is so much in our head. If you had any questions, comments, you agree, disagree, follow-up stuff, throw them in the comments, let us know. And of course, as always, if you have other questions to do with floating or anything to do with what we do here, which sometimes I have to question, I don't know the answer to that. Let us know in the comments too, because we're always looking for things to make videos out of, whether they be for floating or just for other random things that can very indirectly be tied to what we do. So,
sweet, man.
With that said, goodbye.